town situated at the top end of the Vale of Clwyd. Traditionally, it's been a market town. Farmers from all over the Vale would bring their animals to be sold in the mart. The town had an impressive railway station and was an important shopping centre for the surrounding area. But Denbigh was also the county town of Denbighshire and a magnet for important gentry families, and chosen as the site for two important institutions, the Howell School for Girls and the massive North Wales Asylum building. But in the 1880s, local government reorganisation brought new challenges to Denbigh town.
In 1889, the first county council elections were held. However, it was decided that the headquarters of Denbighshire County Council should be in Ruthin rather than in Denbigh. In the 20th century, Denbigh town would have to struggle to cope with this unexpected loss of status.
The town was predominantly Welsh-speaking, and Gwasg G, a prestigious Welsh language printing press, was situated in the centre. But the old Norman enclave's culture was still dominated by the English language. The overriding symbol of this was the castle on the town's skyline.
Used to go there to play quite a bit, but very few of us ever went inside, unless they went in over the walls, you see, you know. But the caretaker was always there, always there. If you wanted to go in, you had to pay.
Vestiges of the town's medieval past included a famous cockpit. Market Day was also an ancient tradition still held in the market square. Every week, farmers' wives would travel to town to sell their produce.
I'd have my basket with butter and eggs in. So we'd go to the market and find a place where you could stand and wait. Oh, you could be there for hours, you see, waiting to get your things sold.
For local boys, the weekly market day was a chance to get up to some mischief.
The farmers used to be there with their baskets selling apples and whatever there was, you know. When the farmers were there, see, the kids used to go around the back of them, and the young farmer would be talking to somebody and between his legs pinch the apples.
The town was situated on a busy mainline railway which linked Denbigh to the rest of Wales. It was also a thriving shopping centre with hundreds of family-owned establishments. However, in 1914, the First World War broke out. The town emptied of young men called up for king and country. But the war wasn't the exciting adventure that many had been promised.
Well, I remember him coming home on leave once, and he cried his eyes out. It was a very cruel war, I believe. And I suppose he hated going back. Well, my mother tried to persuade him. She didn't want to see him caught up with the military police, you know. Everybody knew what would happen. You'd be against the wall, you know what I mean? You know what that means, don't you?
But when the war ended, returning heroes weren't always made to feel welcome. People like Isaac Jones's brother.
He was severely gassed, mustard gas, and he was terribly disfigured when he came home. Lost all his hair. Well, a person's been burned, you know what they look like. That's the same with him, you see. All his face and down his neck here. Quite a while before he would go out in daylight, you know.
Lack of work was a big problem in Denbigh after the war, and the reading rooms in Lenton's Pool was a place that many unemployed could spend the day and read a free copy of a newspaper. However, for the many gentry families living in the wealthy Vale of Clwyd, life hadn't changed that much in the early 20s.
they had very big shooting parties. People from all sorts of other halls coming to shoot, of course. Just a big knobs, you know, they all came. It was quite a sight to see them turning out in the morning, you know, and all the keepers and all, but when they go with their guns, and we had to feed a lot of them too. It was quite exciting and hard work.
Many of these rich families sent their daughters to private schools. Denbigh had two, St Bridget's and the larger Howells School for girls, the twin school of Howells in Cardiff. It was established by a Welsh businessman's trust fund and run by the Drapers Company of London. Education there was privileged, and there were many important rituals, like the yearly speech day.
First of all, the Drapers would arrive from London, that's a contingent of them, by bus. They'd stayed at the Grosvenor Hotel in Chester and arrived by bus, and we all lined the drive and waved happily. And then we had lunch, and the girls led out down the steps, and then divided, two went each way, until we'd filled the whole of the steps of the amphitheatre. So speech day was quite exciting.
The pupils enjoyed many games and also had a swimming pool.
It was an open-air pool, and Miss Robinson would let us swim on Sundays after church. This was not very popular with some of the Denbigh folk. They didn't approve. And if they were walking up near the castle, they could see us.
For town girls on the outside looking in, it seemed like another world.
Oh yes, Dad had a swimming pool, yes, but it wasn't for the use of the Denbigh. I often used to go to Bryn Park, and we could see them in the swimming pool from there. Bryn Park was high, you could see them there.
There was work to be found at the large TB hospital at Llangwyfan, but the economic backbone of Denbigh was the enormous North Wales Asylum. It had over 1,500 beds and employed over 1,000 people. Staff there took great pride in their difficult work.
It was an asylum. It wasn't a hospital. It was an asylum. It was on our buttons, brass buttons, NWA, North Wales Asylum.
Security was very, very important. At that time, you carried your key in your pocket wherever you went, and you had to be sure to, after unlocking the door, to make sure that you locked it after you, wherever you went, didn't matter where.
Treatment for mental illness was in its infancy, and one new idea being tried out at the time was ECT, or electroconvulsive therapy.
It was very, very barbaric, with electrodes to the temple, soaked in saline water. They had to put a gag in between his teeth to make sure that he didn't bite his tongue. Then the electric switch was pressed, and he had an electric shock.
The bastion of Welsh culture in the town was Gwasg printing press. It published the famous Banner paper under the ownership of the renowned author, Dr. Kate Roberts. But Denbigh lived in the shadow of the castle, and the dominant cultural forces in the town were those of the British Empire, including the Girl Guides.
Guides from other areas would meet in the castle. It was another good time we had, and that's quite a few guides. Oh, they used to have the usual pack songs. There's slopes in the castle, and there'd be groups in different areas, you know. The top of the castle ground was packed.
There was a renewed feeling of Welshness when the Eisteddfod arrived in 1939, to much excitement. But a few months after these images were shot, the Second World War broke out, and Denbigh was thrown head over heels into the war effort. The early 40s were a hectic time, with hundreds of soldiers encamped around the town. Every activity was organised to help the war effort, including one display by the Howells School for Girls.
The school took part in some gym displays, in fact presented two of them, one for War Weapons Week and one for Wings for Victory Week during the war, which were, you know, fundraisers for the forces, vaulting over the backs of people like a leapfrog back, and there were some simpler things with the smaller apparatus. We couldn't take the big apparatus like the box and the horse up there, but we did some exercises and things with benches.
But despite the excitement, the war had a damaging effect on the Welsh language in Denbigh, as hundreds of evacuees arrived in the town to escape bombing in the large English cities.
Well, they didn't speak Welsh, did they? So we spoke English. And I suppose in school it was all English, wasn't it? So unless you were speaking Welsh at home, you soon lost your Welshness.
The war had been a busy but very difficult time. At the end of the war, Denbigh was hit by the incredible blizzards of 1947. When the snow finally thawed out, Denbigh looked forward to a brighter future.
"'Tis not the pen which is poison,
It's our first murder, only terrific excitement.
but the one who wields it.
Whoever wrote this foul letter murdered my wife as surely as if they'd stabbed her through the heart.
Only one person can stop them,
What can one do? There must be something. You know who did it.
and she's got a deadly plan.
We are not put into this world to avoid danger when lives are at stake.
Geraldine McEwen and an all-star cast bring you Agatha Christie's Marple, tonight at 9 on ITV1.
For the world title.
Oi! That was only 8.
That was...
Do another 2.
Friendship. It's a funny old game.
I am not being a substitute. You might be top dog of the football, but here it's different. I'm the governor.
Whatever the result, it's the taking part that counts. Robson Green and Mark Benton. Northern Lights, Monday at 9, ITV1.
The people of Denbigh had been united during the war by a common cause. When it ended, there was a strong feeling of Britishness, and there was great celebration during the coronation of 1953.
We did a fancy dress in our estate, and a couple of the children acted as the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. We went to the town hall, and we had the ceremony there of the crowning.
In the 1950s, it was time for fun again, and there was particular interest when the circus came to town.
I was in school, and the elephants came, well, the whole circus came by train, and most of the children in the school decided to go down to the train station to see the elephants and follow them uptown. And we didn't go back to school. And the headmistress wasn't particularly happy about that. Yeah, well, some of you don't see elephants in Denbigh as usual, do you?
It was an exciting time in farming as well. Farmers enjoyed new harvests with the opening of a creamery at nearby Llandyrnog, and the animal mart was as busy as ever.
That was the only place we could sell our fat stock and dairy stock, all sorts of stock, if you like. It was just a way of farming. The men would come to the market, bring their wives with them, and leave their wives go around Denbigh shopping. The farmers would get the money, and the wives would go and spend it away.
And there were plenty of new things to spend the money on. A large modern garage was built near the animal mart, and opening day created quite a stir.
It was quite a do. We had cars in, new cars in, we had caravans in, and we had Perry Dixon racing Riley in. That was there on show. We had crowds of people coming looking around. That was the main thing. It was very interesting.
Denbigh was booming as a shopping centre as well. There were all kinds of newfangled appliances for sale. But Peter Thomas, who ran a clothes shop, still remembers some old-fashioned material.
Things like Welsh flannel drawers, Welsh flannel vests, because some of the agricultural community still use those during the winter months. Directory knickers made from winseyette. There were ETBs, elastic top and bottoms, or passion killers. I suppose they would come down to the knees. They were quite lengthy bloomers, if you like.
The 60s was a time of change in Denbigh. Many old structures came down. The cockpit was dismantled and moved to the Welsh Folk Museum at St Fagans in Cardiff. There were some gentry families still around, but the days of the shooting parties were well over. Even the town's railway fell victim to Beeching's axe. But much of the old Denbigh remained. Howell's School was still as busy as ever, with new generations of pupils. And there was even a new building. As a new Welsh language primary school, Ysgol Twmwr Nant started a slow fight back for Welsh in Denbigh. Another bastion of Welshness, Gwasg G was still a hive of activity in the town centre.
The noise was quite bad, really, because there was one electric motor running a pulley system, and there would be about 4 machines worked off this by pulleys, and the pulleys would be working continually.
Gwasg G now concentrated on book publishing and became one of the most important publishers of contemporary Welsh novels.
There was various authors, you know, it's Saunders Lewis's Blood Ava. Tom Levin Williams' Umquil was another one. Williams Parry, I.D. Hewson, Craddock Pritchard, No Solar Laird. The list is endless, really.
The North Wales Hospital was still the town's major employer, but arriving there for a job interview was a daunting task.
The fear, if you like, going up the drive to the front steps. The size of the place, it was enormous. But there, once you were in and you, like I say, I was interviewed and yes, I was accepted and I started as a cadet nurse there, and you soon got used to the way of life inside there because it was totally different to what you thought it was.
But during the 60s, there were new ideas emerging on how to treat mental health patients. Many believed that institutions were outdated and that the emphasis should now be on reintegrating patients into the community.
The medications became far more effective, but also, along with that, there were lots of different psychological treatments starting to be used. And the combination, plus the fact that they started to appoint staff in the community to support people with mental illness, meant that more and more people were able to come in for shorter periods of time and be discharged a lot more quickly.
During the 70s, bed numbers at the hospital dropped dramatically. The cold wind of unemployment blew over Denbigh as less and less people were needed to work at the hospital. In an attempt to find new jobs for people, an industrial estate was built on the site of the old railway station. Many of the factories there provided a completely new career.
Well, people were very excited about it because of there's work in the area, really, you know, and we were one of the biggest employers at that time. This type of thing, what we were producing, like the therapeutic chairs and port equipment, no one's ever seen it, and it was very exciting because nobody ever seen anything like this before.
But the economic decline of Denbigh continued apace throughout the 80s. The animal mart was closed and moved to Ruthin, leaving a gaping hole in the centre of town.
When they decided to shut the Denbigh market, it was quite a shock to the system. The farmers had been supporting the Denbigh shops over the years, and it came as quite a blow to the town of Denbigh when they decided to shut the market.
The TB hospital had already closed, and the eventual shutting of the North Wales hospital in the early 90s was a huge blow.
The economy of Denbigh was absolutely shattered by the closure because not only did the people who worked there spend money in the town, patients spent money in the town, their visitors spent money, and so really it was a huge part of the economy of Denbigh.
Many new supermarkets were built in the town, including one on the site of the old Animal Mart. But the economic decline of Denbigh was mirrored in the sudden emptiness of town centre shopping.
It's a shame the variety of shops is poor in comparison to what it was when I was in business. You can't buy a man's suit here. And I don't think you can buy a decent pair of shoes here because there's no shoe shop.
Culturally as well, Denbigh has been impoverished. The closure of Gwasg marked the end of an era and brought to an end a long and distinguished tradition of printing.
People knew where Gwasg was, didn't they? Do you know what I mean? Doesn't matter what part of Wales you were in. Gwasg, oh, that's in Denbigh, isn't it? There was a bit of Denbigh gone, wasn't it? You know, and a bit of Welsh history as well, because it was the first, I believe, the first printing office in Wales, or at least the longest running, you know, continuously running printing establishment anyway.
The Welsh language was given a boost with the 2001 Eisteddfod and with the opening of a new Welsh language centre in the old reading rooms. But Denbigh is still culturally divided. Howells might symbolise an old Denbigh tradition of Britishness, but it's one of the few Denbigh institutions still standing after 100 years.
I think probably it's one of the biggest, I won't say the biggest, but it's one of the biggest employers of people in Denbigh. There's the whole ethos of the school, which is a continuity in the district and in the locality and amongst people who want independent education for their daughters.
Denbigh is still a historic and beautiful medieval town. Many feel that although the town has lost much of its past, its historical traditions might offer a route to future prosperity.
Denbigh can now escape from the restrictions of its traditions and embrace a new future. Its rich past offers much scope for tourism, and there is talk of a museum of printing and a museum to commemorate the town's distinguished contribution to mental health.
As part of the series, we're running a competition offering a fantastic annual family pass to all National Trust properties in Wales. Just answer the following question. Where is the National Library of Wales? Is it in A, Aberaeron, B, Aberystwyth, or C, Aberdare? Please call with your answer 090 1133 1101 or text Century, then A, B or C to 63334. Calls cost 50p, texts cost 50p plus your standard network rate. The winner will be announced at the end of the series.